All right, hi everyone. Welcome to our Redesigning High School session. We are really excited to talk about this today. I'm Jamie Jutila. I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. I'm a senior program officer at the Walton Family Foundation. As I said, we're really excited to explore this topic with these three national organizations. At the foundation, we've been exploring over the past few years, how can we better support high school to ensure that students are prepared for college and prepared for career. We're excited to see through some of our partnerships and some of our grantees, there's solutions that are bubbling up. But for far too many learners, that experience isn't resulting in the type of success that they want to see. And so we're going to talk to these leaders today to really get under the hood of what are some of the experiences and solutions that they're working on, what are some of the challenges, but most of all, we're really excited to bring a conversation today to talk about why is high school really important at this moment in time, and what can we all do to better support the work that's happening across the country. So I'm going to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and they're going to talk just your name, your role, and then I'd love for you each to share where you went to high school and how that experience shapes the work you're doing today.
All right, hey everybody, good to see everybody out there. I'm Babak Mostaghimi, and I'm a partner with Learner Studio, and I went to school in Blacksburg, Virginia, at Blacksburg High School, because there was only one high school there. It was one of the best sort of things that ever happened to me, growing up in sort of rural Southwest Virginia, and I got just like a great sort of standard high school experience education with a small class and really awesome teachers. So yeah, so great to see everybody out here today.
Hi, it's really wonderful to be here. My name is Sarah Navarro. I am the head of network success at the Execute Institute. And my high school experience was not as peachy as Babak's. I was lucky I went to a really good high school, and I hated every moment of it. I'm not going to actually tell you what high school it was, because that would feel like throwing them really under the bus. But suffice it to say, I was the kid that if anyone ever wanted to skip school, they could rely on me. First period, third period, you name it, I was there. So my school counselor would be really tickled to see me on this stage today that I stuck with it, and I'm in education now. But that is my why. I had really supportive people at my school. My parents were amazingly supportive, and they helped me through. And so my why in this work is that every student should have a relevant, real-world high school experience that keeps them engaged and allows them all the opportunities in the world.
Wow. I'm Brooke Stafford-Brizard, Vice President for Innovation and Impact at the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching. I went to boarding school. I grew up in rural upstate New York, and I had a pretty horrific middle school experience, and also was very passionate about the arts, and boarding school ended up being the right decision for me. And it was, we talk a lot about kind of holistic development now, and I think that was my experience in high school, kind of being in an environment with kind of 24-hour, 7-day-a-week supports, a lot of focus on the arts and student leadership and government, and really, really profound relationships that helped me kind of explore who I was as a developing adolescent. And so I had an amazing experience that.
That's great. Thanks for indulging me in the last question. All right, let's kick this off. We're at a turning point, or maybe you can, weigh in if you think we're at a turning point. For high school education, we're certainly undergoing a transformation of sorts. There's greater attention and energy, whether you're talking about changing workforce demands or reimagining the high school experience to ensure learners are more engaged. But either way, it seems like, the sort of high school is more and more in the sort of main topic of conversation. We're moving beyond the one-size-fits-all model and starting to really think about approaches that grapple with some of the long-standing roadblocks, like seat time. That's really, meant that school leaders and districts have really struggled to innovate and really free up, the sort of time that students have to allow them to do things that are going to really get them excited, but also relevant world learning experiences. So maybe you could each take a moment to reflect about why do you think we are seeing the transformation or the greater conversation elevating the topics around high school redesign right now? I'd love to ask Sarah if you wouldn't mind kicking us off. XQ has been leading in the high school redesign space for quite a while now. And so I'd be curious, what is your reflection at this moment in time?
Yeah, thanks for that question. We're delighted that there's all this attention on high school. XQ has been focused on high school for the last decade. We see it as the fulcrum for change. We think that if we can transform the high school experience, we can transform what comes before that, and we can transform what comes after it. And the moment for that is definitely now. Given where we are, I think, rebounding from the pandemic, dealing with learning loss, having NAEP scores that are at historic lows, we know that what we're doing isn't working. We also have the research on our side. When you look at brain development and neuroplasticity, this period of time when students are in high school is the amount of development that's happening in their brain is similar to what was happening when they were 5 years old. So we have this incredible window. We underestimate our high school students and what they're capable of, but the research has caught up to that, and I think that there's a lot of movement and momentum. We also have a workforce that is employers that are demanding more. Their needs are changing as our industry is changing, and they're saying that they need students to come out of high school, they need to graduate more prepared and more ready, and so are our colleges and universities. So we have all of sort of a groundswell of interest in making high school really work for all kinds of reasons. And then the other stakeholder that I just want to put at the center are the students themselves. I have the pleasure of talking to students all over the country in the context of focus groups, and I would say almost every time you talk to a young person, they are craving for a real world experience. They just want to be set up for success in what's next. And so we've started to give them the microphone in really powerful ways, and they're telling us that high school matters and that we need to figure out ways to transform it.
That's great. Brooke?
Yeah, I think I'd add that kind of all of that groundswell that Sarah's naming is creating enormous appetite to kind of look back at our history within the education system and revisit some of the tools and structures that are creating the barriers to transformation. And so the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching was created in 1906 by Andrew Carnegie. And it was created really to focus on the profession of teaching in higher ed. And it's about a little over a decade after the Committee of 10, this kind of top-down committee of higher education professional men decided what the high school diploma would be. We're not that different in terms of what we name, in terms of the requirements for a high school diploma 130 years later. But what Carnegie created in 1906 was the Carnegie Unit, and what Jamie named as seat time, the credit hour. It's why your college degree was 120 credits, and it's why we named the number of credits that students need to earn to get their high school diploma. And it was a tool that actually was created as an accounting tool for pensions, but it was quickly recognized as this solution to scale both the K-12 system and higher ed. And so recognizing it was a helpful tool to reach that type of scale and offer an educational opportunity to all students, we recognize now that it conflates time and learning, it conflates place with learning, and it conflates content with learning even. We know students learn a lot more than history in a history class. Yeah. And so now there is enormous appetite that we see to kind of move beyond that conflation, to expand what we define as commencement level success. Half of our states have portraits of graduates now that are defining what success looks like, and hopefully we'll repeat it a few times in this conversation, but those are yes ands. They include academic rigor, they include academic outcomes, and the broader set of skills that workforce and higher ed are asking for. And so I think we're meeting a moment where we're ready to kind of revisit some of these historical structures.
Great.
Yeah, and I think for us at Learner Studio, we're really focused on accelerating progress towards a learner-centered future, right? And part of that is centering a new set of goals for young people and for our schools. And that those new sets of goals are really around thriving in life, career, and community. And there's a real question. I think the reason that this focus has come on the high school experience and reimagining it is because people are starting to see like a very strong and growing disconnect between what the educational experience is for their young person, for their child, and what the careers want, what the workforce wants, what employers want, what young people want for themselves, and all those sorts of things. And for many years, we were able to sort of fudge it and sort of fake it until we make it, where it's like aligned enough. And then now we're getting to a place where people are just like, this doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think between parent demand, young people demand, employer demand, I think we're just at a moment where people realize, hey, like something has to change. And there are lots of really great organizations. I see many of you guys in the audience who are starting to do that work.
Yeah. All right, Brooke, let's talk a little bit about Carnegie's National R&D Agenda that you launched this spring. You brought together experts to create an agenda for U.S. high school education. Can you talk a little bit about how this initiative is driving change at the national, but also what does that look like for the average American high school?
Yeah, absolutely. When we think about the kind of transformation that we're trying to support within a national agenda, we recognize the need for a new architecture, right? And in close partnership with partners like XQ, identifying that needs to be comprehensive, right? That needs to name a broader set of goals, the learning experiences that support progress toward those goals that are experiential and meaningful and real world and everything that we named in terms of where there's demand, and a broader set of signals that are meaningful and actionable that provide formative feedback to our young people and educators. And so that vision of a new architecture is driving this R&D agenda, but also the recognition that that type of innovation has been happening for a century plus. I'll play history teacher today, and something that's energized us deeply, there's something called the 8-year study that was done in 1930, 25 years into the Carnegie Unit, naming the need to innovate our high schools. And dozens of high schools were supported to innovate and transform with philanthropic support. 200 plus higher education institutions agreed to matriculate students in with a very different transcript. And there was enormous success. The students maintained their academic outcomes. They had a deeper sense of purpose and their role in democracy. But when technical assistance left and the philanthropic funds were complete, everything went back to the same. And so our R&D agenda is about the innovation within the high school model. Yeah. But it's also about understanding what are the levers that we need to focus on to ensure that the innovation can root, sustain, and scale in our systems. And that R&D agenda has been informed by students, parents, caregivers, educators, our leaders in the system, to really identify what we need to focus on in terms of development and where we need to continue to apply innovation and iterate to get to solutions for scale, as well as research where we're ready to ask questions around where there's evidence for impact that can inform ongoing decision-making and policy. And so we're really excited to publish this agenda and then launch a strategic piece of it within our own network of 25 systems that we'll also be launching later this spring.
That's great. And you're also touching on one of the big challenges we're going to talk about towards the end, which is scale and sustainability. Let's talk a little bit about the work that Learner Studio is doing with Gwinnett County Schools. What are you seeing in the high school space around shaping career readiness or student readiness for both higher education and the workforce? And what are you guys doing with Gwinnett County?
Sure. So this actually merges two parts of my life. In a former life, a year and a half ago, I was with Gwinnett County Public Schools as an assistant superintendent overseeing our brand new high schools and a bunch of our innovation work. And also my new career here with Learner Studio, where we're fundamentally reimagining the sort of architecture of the system itself in order to make it so that these great ideas can flourish and sort of not trend back towards the mean. So in Gwinnett County Public Schools, for example, when we were there, we launched the first AI-themed high school in the country. This was something we had been working on since 2017, so long before ChatGPT. And the thing that we really used as our organizing principle was how do we ensure that young people are prepared for their future? And the thing that we recognize is that more and more often, we're preparing kids for a world that no longer exists. And so our model was really fundamentally getting to the questions of like, how do you become a creative problem solver? How do you become an ethical leader? And then within that, there's also the big AI piece of, and what does AI mean in this world for that? How do you apply AI to your life? How do you lead the development of AI in ethical and great ways and those sorts of things? Outside of that though, with Learner Studio, we've been seeing a lot of really great models across the country that approach things like student agency in new ways, that sort of rethink the transition between high school and college, so that there's less of a sort of a bumpy road and more of a sort of a general trajectory, and really let sort of young people become who they want to be, as opposed to who we want them to be, which ends up being sustainable and better for everybody.
That's great. Sarah, do you want to share a little bit about how XQ is working with schools and districts? Maybe some of your insights from some of the schools that you guys have been working with for several years or over a decade.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. I'll go back a little bit in history, not 100 years, but I'll just go back about a decade when XQ started. So when we were founded, we launched the XQ Super School Competition. It was an all-call around the nation to ask communities to raise their hand. Communities that were fed up with how high school was not meeting the needs of students were able to bring together design teams and submit applications for new models, innovative models. And from that competition, we had 10 schools and then a couple more schools along the way that we have continued to support. And we've learned so much from them. I will say that we didn't go into that competition with the answer of what that high school transformation would look like, but rather with a set of principles that are research-based that we believe that every good high school should have. So at XQ we have 6 design principles. We believe that there should be strong mission and culture, meaningful engaged learning, caring, trusting relationships, youth voice and choice, smart time, space, and technology, and community partnerships. So none of those should sound surprising. Those are things that I think are in many schools, but what we did was we worked with communities to really focus on how their model would show and shine through each of those design principles. And so as we continue to support those schools, we've been really proud of a lot of the progress and success. So I'll use an example like Crosstown High. So for those of you who haven't seen our documentary, The First Class, I'll put a plug in to watch that. It follows the first class of Crosstown High School through their journey. It's a project-based learning school, so the students are learning across the curriculum. They're doing things like understanding life on Mars, having empathy, interviews with refugees, so rich projects that help them gain competencies and academic skills at the same time. And we've also been able to see a lot of really exciting results. Nearly every high school student at Crosstown has taken at least one AP class, and 80% of those students go directly to college after high school, and they've won annually more than $10 million in scholarships. Wow. So we see innovation, we see it working. We're really excited about that. We have since evolved our strategy. We continue to support those schools, but we've evolved to work with states and districts as well. So I'll give an example of Rhode Island. In Rhode Island, we did what we call an educational opportunity audit, where we worked alongside of the state to just show the data of what was happening with high school students in Rhode Island. And that process has students at the table, educators, parents, community members, and it shows the journeys of these students, and then it allows the community to say, to look at what's happening and make some decisions about what should be next. So in the Rhode Island example, what that meant is we learned that there were so many students in Rhode Island who wanted to go to college, but actually the diploma itself did not have the rigorous standards necessary to even be eligible, let alone get into the local institutions. So Rhode Island took massive legislative action, and I'm super excited to say that this 9th grade class this year is under the brand new graduation requirements, which will ensure that every student is fully ready and prepped to go to college if that's the path that they choose. We're also working in districts like Washington, D.C. and New York City. And while we're working with subsets of schools, I think what's exciting about the work in districts is these schools are teaching the district, the central offices, what it takes to transform. So we're starting to see some of those policies take root. We're starting to see things be in strategic plans in Washington, D.C. It's part of the chancellor's priority to continue, high school innovation. And we're excited about the work in New York City around Future Ready, where we're looking at how college and career connected learning can mesh with project-based learning and be really innovative for great results for students. Great.
All right, we are really starting to get into solution mode. We're hearing about, preparing kids for AI, new models, working with states, working with districts, really trying to scale some of these enabling conditions. Let's talk a little bit more about some of the solutions. So I'd love to dig into some of the things you guys are seeing. Brooke, curious about Carnegie's work with ETS and really starting to dig into assessment. Yep. We know that changing assessment is going to help change, future education models. So what are you guys doing on that front?
Absolutely. That is an initiative called Skills for the Future. And so when we talk about that architecture of the broader set of goals, the learning experiences, this is really an effort to bring those signals to life and recognize that we need valid, reliable tools to measure a lot of the skills that we're talking about. And we have had access to frameworks for many decades at this point, naming 21st century skills, soft skills, many, many different things. And we've had a very difficult time in the field measuring these skills and ensuring that we're measuring them both in and out of the classroom, recognizing that if you're talking about collaboration, communication, critical thinking, these skills manifest and are demonstrated everywhere. And so our partnership with ETS is really to bring these to life with formative, action-oriented signals. We're building gamified modules where students can actively engage and demonstrate the skill of collaboration, for example. And through this process, we're also building a contribution to the research base. Like, we know that these skills, like I said, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, they're all C's, curiosity, creativity, that they are predictive of really important outcomes in life, not just high school graduation, but performance in higher ed, happiness, health, a lot of different things. What we need in the research base are stronger understandings of how they develop and developmental progressions, and that is something that we'll be able to build out with these tools and support kind of valid, reliable tools that identify how these skills grow and develop over time, and recognize that they're a muscle, right? That it's not something that you just you get your collaboration score and you've got it and you'll never lose it. It's something that you have to continue to build, as we all know, and continue to get the type of feedback in terms of the environments that set us up for the best success. And we as self-aware adults know that, but if we can bring that type of support and feedback to students to help them develop these skills and also advocate for the type of contexts that are going to support them to continue to demonstrate them, we feel like that's an enormous breakthrough.
That's great. Sarah, Babak, anything else? What would you guys add? What would you put in the mix for, let's get on the table, what are some additional exciting, innovative high school solutions?
Yeah, for sure. I'll jump right in. So one of our investments is in an organization called Play Lab. You guys actually can experience the Play Lab experience here in a couple of the sessions that are going on right now. And essentially, what I love about Play Lab and what it essentially does is it typically an AI tool sort of tells a teacher what they're allowed to do. Like, hey, here's an AI tool that will build you a lesson plan, or here's an AI tool that will write you an IEP, or those sorts of things. What Play Lab does is it flips that sort of conversation on its head, and it makes it so that teachers actually become inventors and designers of the tools that they need. So what ends up happening is you get remarkable solutions for teachers at the high school level in particular to some of their most pressing needs, right? So for example, there's a teacher at a KIPP school, for example, that was an English teacher, high school English teacher. He's like, I need to figure out a way to replicate myself, to give feedback to a lot of students at once, because I can't do it. Just because there are 26 kids or whatever and one of me. And so he was able to use Play Lab to develop a tool that gave feedback as though it was him to young people on their particular essays and things like that, thereby freeing him up to be able to do more one-on-one relationship-based work and those sorts of pieces. And so I think the important thing there, and I think what we're seeing overall is we're starting to see a shift slowly but surely away from just AI for efficiency purposes and AI far more towards like getting to effective instruction, which really starts at that relationship level between young people and their instructors and among each other, right? Another example that I think is really neat, not in the AI front, but a neat high school model, is the One Stone School up in Idaho, where they just like have dramatically transformed and flipped on its head what it means for students to own a model, right? So I want to say something like 2/3 of their school board is young people, and hey, there you go. They do. I'm glad they're here. They're doing incredible work and really just flipping on its head what student agency means and student leadership. And kind of like we've all been in places where young people ask for a seat at the table and want to be heard. In that case, they're really taking it on, embracing it, and just doing some really remarkable stuff there.
Love it. Sarah?
Yeah, I'd love to just piggyback on the great work happening. So exciting. And talk a little bit more about the competencies at XQ. So we have a set of learner outcomes. There are 5 of them, and from there we have 37 competencies. And to Brooke's really great point, the thing that we need is we have to be able to live and breathe these. Students have to be able to get feedback on what's happening with these competencies. And we've had them for a while, and they've lived in various iterations, and most recently, they are available now in a dynamic navigator. And so what that means is any context, whether it's in a high school or even in a community organization, teachers, school leaders, community organizers can take these competencies and use them to help bolster learning so students can really get a sense of how they're doing as generous collaborators across all of the things they're doing, and we're not siloing that into just one 45-minute class, because we know that that doesn't work. Another initiative that we're really excited about is our math badging. So in Idaho, Illinois, and Kentucky, as well as with the Bureau of Indian Education, we're looking at badging and credentialing math in different ways. We know that math can be big and scary, and our students are amazing at it if we give them the opportunities. And don't we all love to get little badges and awards along the way? I know I do. But these badges are sort of bigger than a standard and smaller than a course, and they allow students to progress through really interesting projects that are relevant to their lives, and then be credentialed and certified, and those add up to credit. And so that's one way of breaking out that learning in ways that relate to the competencies, give students agency, and create really rich learning experiences across the curriculum.
All right.
Can I think both PlayLab and the Competency Navigator are just phenomenal examples of technology unlocking the opportunity right now. That, the demand is there in so many ways. We know the need is being demonstrated through chronic absenteeism and like the NAEP scores, and the science that Sarah named, the kind of the science of learning and development. Like in the last 8 to 10 years, we've had a lot of guidance from incredible researchers around kind of what it means to kind of represent human development in the classroom, because our education system was developed before all of these sciences emerged. And it felt like the guidance and recommendations that were coming out of these reports and these commissions were like focus on a broader set of outcomes and focus on relationships and make sure you're integrating. And what we heard from a lot of school leaders and educators is, what do you mean? Like, what does that look like? We codify curriculum, we scale curriculum very well, but what we're talking about when we talk about the art of teaching through relationship and a social process of learning is incredible pedagogical practice, right? And now we have these tools that are allowing us to kind of better access like really strong guidance and support to bring that to life, which I think is part of this moment.
Yeah, that's great. So what we've got, AI tools, technology enabling some of the things that we've been working on for a long time, but now are coming to life. A lot around assessment and how we measure, but then also, competencies and how do we create other mechanisms to award and different credit and experiences. graduation requirements. How do we work with states to really address graduation requirements, and that will signal to schools and districts different forms of learning. And then more one-stones. That feels like an obvious one. But yeah, more innovative school models. Okay. Let's talk about something a little bit different, but that's partnership, something that you all do all the time. You're collaborating with districts and schools, but also other national stakeholders. Why is partnership important for this work, and what do you think the most important elements are for building successful partnerships to drive change?
Yeah,
anyone can jump in.
I can kick us off. I think if we're all honest with ourselves, we are all really good at some things and really bad at other things, right? And where we go wrong is when we try to do everything by ourselves because we think somehow we've become geniuses and we can do it alone. And what we've realized out there, especially as Learner Studio, is that when we bring the sort of unique abilities of different organizations together, you can create and unlock just like remarkable results that you couldn't have with any particular organization by themselves. So for example, there's like a new collective of organizations that have joined together called Collective Shift. And essentially they're comprised of some AI tools people, some competency-based learning people, and some sort of bread and butter change management organizations. And between the three of them, what they've realized is that they bring the unique pieces needed in order to support high schools and school districts in general in making their transition from traditional standards-based learning to more competency-based learning. Why? Because you have people who really understand competency-based learning, you have people who really understand change management, and then you have the creation of AI tools that support the coaching and the development and the actual progress and shifting over of standards to competencies, right? And so what happens in those environments is you have people who come to the table genuinely with what they're really great at, and they're willing to say when they don't know how something is or how it works, and they're trying to figure it out, right? So in a situation like that, there are huge questions around like intellectual property, like who owns the results, or like how do you divvy up who's supporting what district and those sorts of things, right? Yeah. But when you bring people together who genuinely just want to have a great impact on the world, it makes it so you can have remarkable outcomes.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Babak. I think that's such a great point. Prior to coming to XQ, I joined XQ about a year ago. I was in the District of Columbia Public Schools. Wonderful, wonderful place to work. But one of the things I learned as a central services school leader is you spend a whole lot of time with other educators. And we spend a lot of time in our educator bubbles. And I love educators. And when you bring other folks to the table and they can bring their superpowers, then you start making things that are exceptional. And so I think that's the moment we're in, and that's what's really exciting. I think honoring folks' superpowers and also having the courage to adjust. We don't get it right the first time, and that's okay. And we have to just keep coming to the table and keep having the sometimes hard conversations, but with organizations and other folks in the field that have that shared vision. That's the most important thing to start with. We're making big moves, and with partners especially like our very good friends at Carnegie. So I'll kick it to you, Brooke.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about transformation, which means we're talking about systems change, which is not an intervention that's going to solve this, right? And there's no silver bullet. And so everything we're talking about today requires partnership with teacher preparation and in-service teacher supports. It requires like stronger collaboration with all of higher ed. It requires an understanding of what's working with communities and kind of community demand authentically represented in these portraits of graduates that we're talking about. So like if we are not partnering with all of the deep experts, especially within communities that understand these systems, then we're gonna have a cute little solution that's gonna fall back to this gravitational pull because the system is that strong. So, and I would just add that humility is the key, right? Just knowing, to Babak's point, like what you know and what you don't know.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, let's transition a little into let's transition to the challenges and lessons learned, because we've got a lot of good ideas on the table. There's lots of promising, innovative models and solutions, but and you called this out, the big risk here is that if philanthropy pulls out of an initiative, or if we have something really great in one district, so it's really sustain and scale. And we probably have a lot of lessons learned from the history of doing different initiatives, but I'd be really curious, each of you to kind of reflect on what are the big challenges, but Brooke, maybe start off and kind of like, what can we do in this moment in time to really overcome some of the things that have challenged us in the past?
Yeah, I think you've heard it from a number of answers across the three of us in terms of not feeling like you know the answer, right? Yeah. And not assuming it's in a certain place. And so when we think about kind of, and it bears repeating, like the innovation that we're talking about has 100% existed in pockets for over a century in our country.
Yeah.
We're talking about Dewey, where there are old pictures of classrooms that are filled with sand, where students are just hands-on exploring through inquiry-driven instruction. And there is a gravitational pull, right? Yeah. And so we could come in from kind of ivory tower and decide that we know what those system levers are that are going to help us to escape that gravitational pull. Or we could look to our partners and our leaders in the field and in these communities. And so part of the R&D agenda is really to identify where there is momentum, and kind of testing certain hypotheses, like where we see portraits of graduates developed in communities in close collaboration with workforce and community members, where they're actually manifesting the values of the community and what the community wants for their young people. And we believe when those portraits are developed in that way, they will sustain and kind of scale and exist for many years to come in the system, because it's representative of what that community wants and what's important. And recognizing that we will always see multiple solutions to these challenges and to this vision of transformation. And so part of the research effort to kind of think about rooting, sustaining, and scaling is also recognizing variation and variability as a strength, right? Yeah. And that, again, it's not one intervention, it's not one specific curriculum that's going to solve all this, but kind of finding ways through really creative and rigorous research methodologies to identify what's working in different ways in different contexts, which is, it's a new approach, frankly, to the way we've done research and education, where it was kind of, let's control an environment very clearly and test this one thing and then tell everyone that it will only work if you do all of these other things, which is not very helpful to our educators. So if we're really studying how these innovations can sustain and scale in context, we're going to, I think, add a lot to the history in terms of some good news for transformation.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll plus one to all of that. I mean, I think I started with something earlier in response that the answers are with the community, and so empowering members of the community to have information and data and giving them frameworks and time and space and confidence to do the design work is going to lead to sustainable designs. I think one thing that we find, we are fortunate to work with incredibly charismatic and leaders that own this work very, very tightly because they believe it in their soul, and that is a beautiful thing. And it can be hard to democratize that vision. And so working, when we think about scale, like helping school leaders and district leaders think from the beginning about how are you not the only one that is going to bed every night and waking up every morning thinking about how important this is. How do you have your co-conspirators right there with you, because those are the ones that are going to ultimately continue to drive the transformation forward. And then just to double click on one more thing Brooke said around sort of this bounce back to the norm. I mean, I think that we have the most creative leaders who they figured out all the workarounds, right? The perfectly legal and by the book policy, okay? Let me just say that now. But the ways to make the policy work for you, right? And you will see a school that is doing something so different from the rest of the district because they've figured out how to navigate all the pieces. So we have to learn from what they figured out and change the policy so everyone else in that district is not only allowed to do those things, but they're actually encouraged and incentivized to innovate in ways that work.
Yeah.
Can I just add, I think just to really double click on that and reinforce, I think we have to be honest with ourselves of how uncomfortable it is to move from the norm, right? And we can talk about innovation and transformation, but when your own child is bringing home homework that you don't know how to help them with, like that's not very comfortable. And so there's a human reaction and a reality to why the norm is comfortable. And it was one of the reasons 100 years ago that high school transformation did not sustain, because parents were saying, that's not how I learned. That's not what happened when I went to high school. And so like leaning into that discomfort for all of us, even those of us who know how important this is, I think is going to be instrumental.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, especially on the community side of things, and like building things with community, getting that community demand for things. I think one of our biggest challenges in this space is a lot of people have great ideas but have no buy-in from the people that they're serving. And so what happens is when that single leader leaves, then the thing leaves too, right? When I was in Gwinnett County Public Schools, our like AI themed high school outlasted 4 or 5 different configurations of a school board, 2 different superintendents. Why? Because that community was so bought into the initial vision of like the AI readiness work that anytime someone would come along and say, maybe we should do something different, they would just show up in droves and be like, no, that's not what we signed up for. That's not what we want, and we're going to make sure it continues. The other challenge that I think is sort of the elephant in the room is I think we have a little bit of like a poverty of imagination of like what's possible for young people, and most of the things we try and do are just iterative, like slightly improved above what we have now, and as a result, people kind of get to the destination, they're like, that's it, and then it like trends back to the mean because it wasn't that incredible anyways. I think what we're seeing in really, really unique models that are really transforming things, like at Crosstown, like at One Stone and other places, are models that really push the boundaries of what's possible, and create situations where young people can truly become who they want to become, right? And so part of the challenge nationally is people say this all the time. They're like, hey, you know, like when a patient is bleeding out, you're not worried about if their like toenails are clipped, right? And I'm sitting there going like, what are you like? How does that relate to young people in our schools? Like, this makes no sense. They're like, well, you can't innovate until you take care of the bread and butter of like reading and writing and math. And then the reality though is that we can't take care of reading and writing and math unless we take care of the student as a whole. Like it's not just like, hey, we need to drill you a little bit harder and those sorts of things. We need to build you up as a human being and help you reach the goals that you want that include knowledge in those areas, but don't exclude all the other things around empathy and creative thinking and the collaboration that you also want. So hopefully between engaging with communities in new ways and really having a bold vision for what could be, we can sort of get beyond some of the rut that we fall into sometimes, especially with high school redesign.
And have you guys had any success yet? And anyone can say this, but I think this is kind of at the core of the issue, right? Is that we do have these really brilliant, innovative models, and some really, amazing leaders who are doing them. And then how do you take that to other communities and scale? And I just, is there any other parting thoughts on, that particular struggle? Because I think what you're elevating, you guys all have seeded innovation in really amazing ways, and now how do we get that to more kids so it doesn't have to be on that one particular leader?
Sure. I mean, this is a really hard question, right? And if I had the
actual
answer,
that's why we saved it for the end.
We'd be out there doing it together, right? But here's what I'd say. I think one of the big questions we have to ask ourselves when we're trying to go to scale is what is it that we're actually trying to scale? Like, what part of the model is it that actually is making the rest of it work? And oftentimes we replicate and scale the things we see rather than the things that actually make the thing work, right? And so what I would urge people to do is, as we're thinking about scale, we have to think about scale of every piece of a model, and at the same time take into consideration like the unique configurations of a community and what works where. So just like not everyone will go to McDonald's, right? Not everyone will go to Burger King either. But between McDonald's and Burger King and Five Guys and all these other places, you cover a very, very large number of people. And then you have those who are like, that's not actually a burger. Yeah. Like, I want something totally different, right?
Yeah.
And so I think similarly with schooling, like we have to think differently about what scale means, who is scaling it, how we figure out what to scale where, and all those sorts of things.
That's good. Any other thoughts?
I think that means we rethink what we mean by fidelity of implementation, right? When we have evidence-based practice or research-based programs, fidelity until now has meant, again, in order to achieve these results, you have to put these 10 constraints in place, which ends up being impossible for our educators. And so to actually conduct research and build evidence exactly the way you're naming, Babak, is about understanding context, understanding what we'll have to iterate, what we'll have to be comfortable with in terms of variation when it moves to a different context, and then trusting the teachers and the leaders to know what will work for their community. And 100% there will have to be iteration, but this idea of just plunking down something that has worked somewhere else is definitely not the solution. So.
Great.
Yes, +1 to that, and Babak, all of that resonates so much. I would say, we need all the ingredients, right? So if we're going to make this work, I think it's about the policy. We've talked a lot about policy, but about policy in terms of what are states not only, again, enabling, but incentivizing for districts to do and take advantage of, and how are they learning from what some of the amazing models in their respective states are doing. So what does that cycle look like from a policy perspective? I think that's how we scale. And I think we scale through these solutions and products that we've talked about. XQ has our competencies. You've talked about some of the amazing work at the Play Lab and the assessments that Carnegie and ETS are working on. These are all the meat and potatoes, the real ingredients for what's required for this to really take hold and move us into the next place that I think we're all so excited and so ready to be in.
Okay. We have a few minutes for questions. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Looks like it, yeah.
Looks like we do. And I think there are microphones. Yep, if you guys want to line up, sorry.
Hi, I'm Gerard Senahi from the Question Project.
Hey, Gerard.
Hey, Babak. I wanted to ask the panel as a whole, given this more expanded view of what students need and what you beautifully expressed about really including the whole child, more than just a collection of parts, but the human being. I'm curious about this phrase that we use all the time about preparing students for college and career. It has such a bias towards focusing on what students will do in their lives, and it really leaves out entirely the moment in history that we're in, our humanity, their deep connections with each other, their connection with life, their role in being here. And so if we have a phrase that we use constantly, like preparing students for college and career, we're continuing that paradigm that marginalizes the most important part of our humanity.
Yeah, I can jump in there, and if anyone hasn't heard of the Question Project and the work that Gerard and their team are doing, you should definitely look into it. Very, very human-centric, human-based approaches to ensuring that young people have a sense of who they are and why they are and those sorts of things. So at Learner Studio, we purposefully don't say college and career. We talk about thriving in life, career, and democracy or community. And the reason for that is specifically exactly what you're saying, Gerard. Trying to make sure that we understand that young people are human beings who are more than just a career and just college, while recognizing that college and career are also very, very important parts of ensuring that life works, just logistically as you get older. But Gerard, I love the push of making sure that we're human-centered in our language and our approaches. I think that's a fair point.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that in a lot of the visions for graduates. That whether it's resilience, which requires both internal skills and like support from your community, right? Or resourcefulness or global citizens. Like I think the portraits are starting to identify the fact that it isn't just about a job.
Yep, and just being able to make sure that those portraits are not sitting on a shelf, but are actually living and breathing, and most importantly, are in the hands of the young people themselves. Because to that really great question, we've got to empower young people to own their identities, and that's a way to do that is through these portraits, through these competencies that allows for that introspection about who they are holistically and how they relate to others in the world.
Sarah, I want to give you credit. I found out my son skipped school today, so I've got hope that he's going to be successful.
He's going to be just fine. Don't even worry about it.
I got a lot of hope.
He's on the right track.
My name's Nate Clayberg. I'm with the CAPS Network. So my background's economic development business. So I come into this a little bit and look as I got involved with CAPS about 8 years ago in Iowa, and I realized why education doesn't change because the customer always changes. So from semester to semester, year to year. So, but we're also asking students to do things they've never been asked to do, let alone having teachers do it. So we're still spitting out teachers out of the college ed programs like we have, and we're coming up with the ideas that we have for high school, but we're asking these people to pull it off. Yeah. Where are we at on professional development and making that better? Because we have to have buy-in, or we're back where we're at.
I would love to take that one. I am really excited that XQ recently, in partnership with ASU, released what we call the XQ Power-Ups, which basically I referred to the design principles earlier in my talk, and so these are professional development modules that are specifically supportive of teachers who are coming into the field around how do you do really great project-based learning that looks different than the norm. These are modules that they're free, they're open to anyone and everyone, both in teacher prep programs and folks who are already teaching in high schools. It can be used as professional learning. Obviously, it's one of many solutions, but we're excited for that contribution because you're exactly right. We can't just ask people to do something different and not give them guidance on what that looks like and what that feels like and expect it to work.
Anyone else?
I mean, I would just add it's what teachers are learning in pre-service and in-service professional development, and a reimagination of the profession.
Yes.
Like young people aren't going to go into teaching and stay for 30, 40 years.
Right. Yep.
And so how do we recognize that as a potential solution and an asset to this field in thinking about the porous nature of the profession as we move forward?
Yeah, one thing really quick to add also is that from the Learner Studio perspective, we are really thinking about not only reimagining teaching and teaching roles, but also rethinking like who is teaching and the many roles that many different types of adults and other young people can play. There's a very powerful sort of peer-to-peer learning component that I think we often miss as we think about, well, what's the adult going to teach? It's like, well, actually, if our focus is what does the young person learn, it changes who and where and why they can learn from.
And it's so true in high school too. The more sort of, when you walk into a lot of high schools these days, especially if you're looking at some of the career-oriented pathways, so many of those adults came from the business sector or came from those careers, and now they've transitioned in the classroom. So ensuring that we still have multiple pathways into the profession is a big one, and something also that ASU is working on.
So those two comments actually really link in well with what I'm wondering about. Brooke, I heard you say that many of our classrooms now look the same as they did 100 years ago. And so in thinking about scalability, many of our teacher contracts and collective bargaining agreements also look exactly like they looked 100 years ago, only with salary scales changing. And so I wonder, hopefully, I'm wondering then, when we talk about scalability for something like Crosstown or One Stone, in districts that are that have those CBAs that have not changed a whole lot, what work is being done to really work with teachers unions and educators and CBAs to ensure that that kind of innovation can be scalable and sustainable?
I'll take it. It's a doozy. It's a great one. It's the right question. I'm actually thinking about work at DC Public Schools, who is a district that is working on, as I mentioned before, transforming. One school in particular that comes to mind that's very heavily unionized school, sort of very, very proud union roots. And the school has done, the leadership and the students have done such an incredible job in getting the buy-in of those teachers that feel very connected to their identity as union members. And they have changed the game for how those teachers now show up. They're no longer saying, it's not in my contract, so I'm not going to do X, Y, and Z. They're saying, I'm here to help. How can we do this together? That's not the solution. It's not codified and sustained yet, but I think it's a part of the process, and I think the policy work is the other part, right? So we need it sort of from the bottom up. How do we have the buy-in from the community, including those teachers who feel really connected to that contract? But then how do we also work with the state on what are the policy enablers that will allow for this? And then that has to trickle down into how do union contracts get smarter about how they evolve to meet that moment. And it doesn't have to be a loss for teachers. In fact, if done right, I'm very convinced, as I'm sure many of you in this room are, that it's a gain. And so we need to put the right conditions from the bottom up, from the top down, to do the case making so those contracts can begin to evolve with the moment.
Yeah, and I think, again, rethinking the profession itself is part of the solution. If you think about designing the profession to ensure that teachers are impactful through joyful, sustainable work, then it starts to solve a lot of those challenges. But I think that partnership and empowerment and an asset-based lens on our educators is so much of what you named, Sarah, which is so critical.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is, I was a 5th grade science and social studies teacher in Mississippi. We had no unions, and we had a lot of problems. And so I bring this up because I think it's easy to get fixated on one particular reason why something can or can't work. And I'd actually argue it's much more deep and systemic than what type of contract a person does or doesn't have. And so while that's part of the challenge is figuring out how to operate under those conditions, like I work in Georgia right now where we also don't have teachers unions, and you're running into a lot of the same issues, but it's not, so not saying it is or isn't the problem, but just saying it's a much more complicated question of how do you scale solutions in a lot of different places.
We have time for maybe one or two more, so.
Hi there, my name is Kamsi McAdams, and I worked in DC Public Schools and worked in Gwinnett, and I'm a former teacher, and have worked with people at Carnegie, but now I work at the STEM Next Opportunity Fund, and we work to build high-quality STEM programming for out-of-school time. And one thing, Brooke, you said was about those 21st century skills are so important, not just in the classroom, but beyond. And I wonder, in high school, we see a dramatic decline in enrollment in out-of-school time because other things take priority, academics, sports, et cetera. But what is something that an organization like mine can do to help fuel your movement? And then also, what can we do to set up younger children in the out-of-school time for success in these hopefully reimagined high schools?
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick because I think the boundaries between out of school and in school time are starting to disappear. We're seeing a lot of blurring already, and I'd encourage that. I think that's really great. Joel Mehta and Sarah Fine did their a deeper learning sort of study where they found that a lot of the most incredible work was happening in out of school time. From the Learner Studio perspective, we really see the need for credited learning anytime, anywhere. And so where it happens doesn't really matter. So I would urge organizations like yours, from my perspective, to keep up the good work. Keep doing really rigorous work that's hitting not only the academic skills, but the social skills that make sort of life work for young people. And I think over time what we're going to see is the crediting of what they're learning in those environments as part of their sort of transcript and school day and those sorts of things.
Yeah, what he said.
Yeah, that's the big one.
Is there time for a quick one?
Yeah, we've got,
Hi, my name is Bree. I'm here with a team of teachers from Calgary, Alberta, Canada, so just north for a long
really,
time.
it's cold up there.
It's cold. It was almost minus 40 last week, so this is really lovely here, and it's good, it's good. We bundle. We are working on developing an innovative school within a school that allows for hybrid, asynchronous learning with a strong project-based learning, community connection, entrepreneurship focus. It's year 2. It's so humbling.
Yeah.
This work is so humbling. And the thing that we're butting up against that we'd love your thoughts on are that in our province, we're accountable for provincial exams. I would imagine much like your standardized tests. And our grade 12 provincial exams are worth 30% of your final mark, and they are just like content.
Yeah.
They give you no value to who you've developed as a person or your critical thinking. It's like, you got to know the answer. How do you navigate what feels like a tension between good teaching and then those things that we're accountable to outside of our organizations?
I think that new architecture, that we're naming in terms of measuring a broader set of goals, reinforcing and supporting the kind of pedagogical approach that you're taking will require the assessments change, require different signals. And
I agree.
All of that policy work that we're talking about it's state policy here in the States and down to local policy into school policy.
Yeah.
But I think we build that model and kind of demonstrate the impact it can have, accountability is going to respond.
I think that's right. And in the meantime, right, because this is what you have in front of you, I would say finding ways to tell the story of success for that school. Story-tell all the great things that are happening. And I think you'll see the great things on those exams too. They're not the right exams. We've got to do a better job. We're going to get better assessments. But in the meantime, just being able to have the narrative of how this innovative model, and yes, it's hard work, but keep it going, because I'm sure it's great work, is making a huge impact on young people. That's going to give you the political will to keep doing what you're doing as we figure out how to reimagine the whole system around it.
Great. All right.
Thank you.
I think we have 1 minute. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Anyone else? Otherwise, we can wrap.
No, I think it's long-term work. I mean, this is not happening tomorrow. So just I think partnership is the key, and dedication and commitment to the change.
Okay.
Yeah, totally agreed. I think it's hard. It's not always linear. It takes all the people in this room and the people on this stage working together and making it better and better. And we have to keep going.
Yeah, work through the hard parts. Our kids deserve it, and you guys are making it happen.
Thank you. All right. Thank you for all the work you're doing, and thank you for everyone else.